Thank you, Reed. And that was very, very nice of you to say those nice things. You'll get the $20 in the mail in a few weeks. So I'm looking around the room. Wow. And I'm watching all these other people join in. Good to see you. Wow. All right. So I got the pressure on right now here. So welcome, everybody. And what I want to do is, I was thinking about a PowerPoint, but I scrapped the idea. I kind of want to approach this talk through the lens of the 12 steps. So who here is applying their recovery through the 12 steps? Raise your hands. Okay. All right. And is there anybody adding anything on to the 12 steps as in recovery support groups? Like, is there anybody adding on, say, like smart recovery? Raise your hands. Smart recovery? Cool. All right. How about celebrate recovery? Anybody adding that on? Yeah. All right. Cool. Celebrate recovery. How about recovery dharma? Anybody adding any of that? This is so cool that we got all these other options out there now today, and everybody can kind of mix and match. But this, I'm going to approach values through the lens of the 12 steps today. And I'm just going to kind of briefly lead us to, I believe, the step that really embraces the concept of values. So step one, right? We admitted we were powerless over our addiction and made our lives unmanageable. Everything we tried to do to manage or control our addiction really didn't work, right? So we come to this place of surrender, like, all right, everything I've tried didn't work and I need some help. So a lot of us came into recovery with that mindset. Now, some of us came into recovery because we had back problems, right? We had our wives on our back, our husbands on our back, our pastors on our back. Some of us, maybe the judge or probation officer might have been on our backs as well too. But along with that, we eventually got to a point where we had to go, I can't do this on my own. I need some help, which then kind of leaves this void in us. And then we walk into step two, which is we came to believe in the power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now there, and let's just stop with step two. So what I believe is a guiding principle in step two is the hope, right? Some of us walk into our first meeting or maybe our first treatment and we see people laughing and we hear about people getting better. And there's a sense of, man, maybe there is a way out of this. I just don't know what it is yet, right? And so we get that sense of hope and that, all right, maybe I need to kind of remain open-minded to see what's going to work here, right? And then that guides us into step three. And I really like the simplicity of step three. Basically, step three is I made a decision. Oh my God, Keith. Hey, Keith, good to see you. Oh man, wow. In step three, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand him. And I really like the simple definition of that step is we made a decision to work the rest of the 9 steps. That's the beauty of step three. I made a decision to apply these spiritual principles into my life, that I am making a decision that I'm going to start working, applying, understanding what each step means and how I can use it for myself, right? And so I always like to share this little story because I believe the most I learned about spirituality and the steps I learned from a person that is still a devout atheist. and I know some of you might look at me like, what is he talking about? Now, first of all, I need to let you know that many different types of religions or spiritual practices, we could find these principles in all of them, in Judaism and in the Islam faith or the Christianity or even Buddhism, right? But what this guy, and I'll mention his first name, Frankie I met back in 1992. He had about 4 or 5 years in recovery, and Frankie and I sat down at a diner, Greasy Spoon Diner on Long Island, New York, one night, and I was asking him about this whole, spirituality, God thing. And Frankie said to me, he said, Joe, I got to be honest with you, I'm an atheist. And I kind of looked at him. Now I know Frankie had about 4 or 5 years in recovery. I also knew Frankie was bringing a meeting into Rikers Island a couple of times a month, an H&I meeting. I knew Frankie had 3 or 4 sponsees, and he had a sponsor. He was a chairperson of his group. And then later on, I found out that Frankie was also translating the Narcotics Anonymous basic text into Russian for people in Russia with addicts, all right, that are addicts. And so I'm like, Frankie, all right, how do you work step 2? And he pulls out this little card out of his wallet. And at Pavilion, do they still hand out the 12 principles? So Frankie pulls out this little card, and he slides it across, and he goes, Joe, I came to believe that those principles could restore me to sanity. And I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of those principles. And that blew me away. And Frankie's still in recovery today. I joke around with Frankie. I try to call him up around Christmas time to wish him a Merry Christmas, though he doesn't celebrate it, but he knows the joke. And he's still doing a lot of great work. So there we're starting to touch that values a little bit more, right? In step 3, but then we move into step 4 and really keep it simple. Step 4 is we put the brakes on our life and we stop and we take stock of our life. We take a look and we collect this data. And we collect this data by looking at people we've harmed. And we could also collect data on resentments that we've carried, because we all know resentments is a very toxic state for us. Now, resentments is different than anger. Anger is healthy, it's normal, and it's really, really important for us to experience anger, because that allows us to say, hey, listen, you've crossed the line. But resentments is like holding on to it. So step 4, we collect this data. And then in step 5, we analyze this data with the help of a sponsor or somebody that's going to help us look at this data. And we also kind of invite a loving, caring, higher power or God to help us examine this data. So we analyze the data we collected in step 4. Step 6 is we come to realize the patterns of behavior, the patterns of thinking that have been keeping us stuck in life, the barriers, right, that prevent us from living, and now we're going to touch it again, a valued life. Because most of us kind of have a feeling that drugs and alcohol were preventing us from living what a life we wanted to, right? Step 6 is we see the patterns that have really been keeping us stuck. And then in step 7 is about applying that solution through humility. And I love the definition of humility is acceptance of our assets and our liabilities. 8 and 9 made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them. We got the list from our 4th step, right, of all the people we hurt. And the willingness comes in to make amends. Now, remember, amends doesn't mean to say sorry. I remember the first time I went around making amends to the people I had harmed, and my sponsor said, you better not say sorry. You go up to the people and say, I've hurt you. How can I make this right? Because amends means to make changes in the relationship. So that's how I did So in step 9, we start touching another value direction, relationships. we start contacting people that we've harmed or we've hurt, and we start making changes in that relationship to where now we come to step 10. It's that constant inventory. We continue to take personal inventory, and we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And there's a special addendum to that step for me, that when I'm right, I promptly shut my mouth. Because when I'm right, I want everybody to know I'm right. Ask my wife. We just had I might be right moment just a little while ago before I started this, and I really had to shut my mouth and go, all right. So, but here in step 11 is where I think values is fully embraced. In step 11, it says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. Now, my old sponsor used to say, Joe, that's the most underutilized step in the AA arsenal. Everybody forgets step 11. And sometimes we need to be reminded about the power of that. Now, Frankie, you might ask, how does Frankie work step 11 when it's got God and him all over, written all over it? And Frankie basically says he seeks through intentions and mindfulness to improve his conscious contact with his true inner being, his true self, who he believes he is, and the values that he embraces in his life. And then he seeks only the knowledge of that for him to carry in his life and the power to carry it out. So who watched the video on Pavilion's Facebook page today? Raise your hands if you watched that video. Why don't we start off the values talk with a video? Let me go into this video.
Society tells us the way to be happy is to achieve our goals. Get that great job, earn that money, get a good body, find a partner, have happy, healthy kids, have a big house, have a nice car, have holidays. Goal, 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 goal. And it's true that if you do actually manage to achieve these goals, then there is a little moment of joy and happiness. But how long does it last? How long before you're looking at the next goal, and then the next goal, and then the next goal? And as we live our life trying to constantly strive to achieve these goals, one after the other, how tiring and exhausting does it get? Is this you? There is a radically different way to live your life, which is a life based on values, a values-focused life. It's like two kids in the back of a car, and it's a 3-hour car journey to Disneyland. And the first kid is totally goal-focused. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? How much longer? Are we there yet? This journey of frustration, it's all about the goal. The second kid is values-focused. He's got the same goal. He wants to get to Disneyland, but he's also in touch with his values around curiosity, adventure, having fun. So he's looking out of the window, playing I Spy with My Little Eye. He's counting all the, the interesting farmhouses that he sees on the way. He's spotting interesting farm animals, cows and sheep. He's noticing different types of trucks and cars on the freeway. So he's actually appreciating the journey as he heads towards his goal. Now, they both reach Disneyland at the same time. They both have a fantastic time at Disneyland because they both got to achieve the goal. But the first kid had a journey of frustration. The second kid had a fulfilling, rewarding journey. Then on the way home, the first kid, are we home yet? Are we home yet? Are we home yet? All about the goal, all that frustration. Second kid's looking out of the window, noticing how the world looks different at night, spotting the lights in the farmhouses and the cat's eyes on the freeway. The car breaks down on the way to Disneyland. Now, both kids are really disappointed because neither of them achieved their goal. But The second kid at least had a fulfilling journey up until that point. Now, when the pickup truck arrives to tow them home, the first kid, oh, it's not fair. I want to go to Disneyland. How long before the car gets repaired? It's not fair. It's not fair. The second kid starts to notice how the world looks different when you're sitting in the front of a pickup truck high above the level of the rest of the traffic. So this is the very important distinction between the values-focused life and the goal-focused life. In the values-focused life, we have the fulfillment and satisfaction of living our values every step of the way towards our goals, the satisfaction of achieving our goals, and the fulfillment that comes of living our values even when we don't achieve them.
So that's a little ditty by one of my mentors, Dr. Russell Harris. He, as you could tell, he's from the south of the equator in Australia. And he's a quite a great trainer in an approach that I'm using now called acceptance and commitment therapy. So any thoughts about that little ditty before we get into some of my other stuff? Anybody have a comment on what we just watched? You can unmute yourself and.
My name's Kathy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kathy.
When I was a little kid, I was the first child. Today, at 72, after almost 13 years of recovery, I can honestly say I believe I'm more the second child.
Me too. Though the first child still comes out every once in a while.
Well, once in a while.
It's still there. We haven't lost that first child. That first child still, and actually that first child can be helpful at times too, can't it?
Parts of it wants to stay when you need to be playful and that kind of thing. Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else?
This is Keith. I know you won't believe it, but I was actually the second child until I became probably about mid-teenage years, and then severe first child. But anyway, because I watched the video and I think back to what happened to that little boy that was so happy, you know. But anyway, I'm good.
Oh man, absolutely right. Yeah, if we really go back, we could remember that second child, right? Experiencing the world of awe and wonder, right? I mean, we could even kind of, take a look at some of the writings, right? In order for us to find the kingdom of heaven, we must be like a child, right? And so there's all these so then it kind of goes back to what do we recover, right? And some of us might say we might be recovering that innocence and awe and wonder of the world child that we still all have within us, right, Keith? And so you can remember a time where that child was pretty dominant. Yeah. Great. Okay. Anything else before I move along? So I want to let you know that, many years ago, we used to do values work where we'd give somebody a sheet of paper and you would circle what's important to you, and you would have the paper and then you would put it in your pavilion notebook and not really look at it again. Everybody on here has got an email address read, right? So I am challenging everybody with a piece of homework by the end of today. So Keith, David, you got homework. I imagine you guys remember me giving you guys lots of homework. Blake too, I can imagine. But Blake, I think you've already done some of this. So let's kind of look at a little bit of the definition of values, because I think it's key for us to really understand. Values work, first of all, is crucial for anybody in early recovery, because we've gotten so used to in addiction looking for that short-term relief of whatever we were seeking that we might have lost touch with our values. And getting in touch with our values helps us set the compass. It helps us kind of gear our direction in life, moving towards something that's important. Because when we initially come into treatment, we want to escape the pain from addiction. But as we really start applying these 12 steps and we really start clarifying our values, then the pull of who and what's important to us is going to be much more stronger than the pain and the push of addiction. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's really critical that we take a look at who and what's important for us. And some questions we can ask ourselves is, what do you want your life to be about? Right? What is important to you? What direction would you choose in your life? How would you choose to make your life unfold? And some exercises we would give would be like maybe kind of, and it might seem a little morbid, but we used to do this exercise all the time, is write your obituary. What would you want your loved ones or your best friend to say at your funeral, right? What do you want your life to be about? And there is where we start making contact with our values. Values are chosen life directions, right? So it's like, let's use the metaphor of going west. All right, so if I want to drive to Nashville, Tennessee, which is west of Asheville, North Carolina, I am going to jump on I-40 West. But if you look at the map, when I jump on I-40 West, I-40 is going to go northwest for a little bit before it drops back down south and then back west again. So, but just because I set my direction in my life, there's still going to be some paths and some different types of ways for me to keep on moving in that value direction. For another example, Martin Luther King, we could tell by the way he lived his life, he valued what? Civil rights. So we could tell by the speeches and by the marches, by even, being locked up in prison for speaking what he believed was important for all human beings to have.
That person has been kicked out of the meeting, Joe. If you'll go back just a little bit and,
Okay.
and pick back up before the noise started.
Yes, I've finally been Zoom bombed. I've never been Zoom bombed before, and I've been doing such an honor. Thank you, Reed, for allowing this experience to happen, man. I mean, this is great. And so, absolutely. So, what did Dr. King solve civil rights by the time he was shot in Memphis, Tennessee? No, right? But we could tell the way he lived his life, that's what he valued. So that's the difference. Values are different than goals. All right, let me go here. So values are chosen life directions. So if you're alive and you have to behave to be alive, you have to make choices. And what are you going to make those choices based upon? So, that old saying is you got to serve somebody, Bob Dylan once sang, right? And so, what valued direction is this decision I'm about to make serving, right? So we know addiction is all about feeling good in the short run. We engage in that behavior, right? But in the long run, it leads to greater suffering, right? And so we come into recovery and we do all that work. And once we get to step 11, it's really, really looking at what do we want our life to be about. We get to choose the direction of our journey and then we develop goals based on the value direction. And just because you reached your goal does not mean you've accomplished your value, right? And so, you know, as we go on with life and we achieve these goals that move us in this value direction, it doesn't mean we're there. Like, I value going this way is east. I'm going to take 2 steps this way. Am I at east? No. I value moving in that direction, but I'll never get there. And then once we set that course, then we could take a look at new behaviors that will help us continue the move in our value direction. So, for instance, 1999, I was done with being a machinist. My body was pretty beat up from banging metal all my life. And I made that decision to get out of the machining industry and move in the value direction of becoming a counselor. Now, that decision to leave machining and move to becoming a counselor was based really on like a couple of values, right? One, I value my personal health, right? And so that doctor said, if I continue to do what I was doing as being a machinist, my body would really break down. And they would have to replace my shoulder, and I was getting arthritis. And so I had to leave that area. Also, though, I valued connecting with people and helping people that were suffering from addiction. So when I set the course, it wasn't easy. Now, listen, I left high school at 17 to join the military. My mom signed me in. I did a couple of years in the Air Force. And then after the Air Force, I was a machinist. So by the time I made that decision to go to school, boy, I needed a lot of help with my academics. So I started with an associate's degree, and then I went to a bachelor's degree, and then I got my master's degree. So I continue to have to take continuing educational credits in order for me to maintain my licenses. I look at different aspects of recovery, whether it's from addiction or mental health disorders or PTSD. So I continue to move in my values. So we covered values and not goals. Remember, values are not feelings either. All of our experiences inform our values, right? But sometimes that means there are feelings that accompany our value choices. Over time, we'll learn the degree to which our feelings can help us know when you're living in accordance with your values. But when we were using drugs or alcohol, we felt good immediately, right? So, you know, we want to make sure that we know values aren't feelings, but they're feelings that accompany values. Another thing, too, that this is hard to swallow for some folks is wherever we find the value, we will always find pain. That's critical. If we look at anything that has brought us pain in our life, right? Psychological pain is what I mean. There's a value connected to that. Who here has ever lost a loved one that was very close to them, right? Just think for a moment when you lost that person. Think about that pain, right? That was tough for us to go through. But if you look on the other side of that pain, it's that value of that loved one, right? We valued that relationship we had with that person. So once we start clarifying values, I need to let you know there's always going to be that pain with it. You can't have one without the other. They're connected. Values are not outcomes. And values don't always mean our paths are always straight. And values are not our future, right? Values are what we're doing in the moment that's moving us towards that value direction. Also, another thing that's important to recognize with values is that as we're moving in our value direction, we will have setbacks. We will have failures. But as we move in our value direction, we might try some behaviors that are really, really new to us. For instance, just turned 61 years old and I want to live another good 20 years. Man, if I could get another 20 years out of my life, that would be great. So, and I tried all the gyms and exercises and stuff like that. It gets boring after a while and I want to just like give up. So during COVID in 2021, we decided to take up tennis. Never played a lick of tennis in my life. I took up tennis for a couple of reasons. One, my personal health. I value my personal health. Also, it's that social community connection. I belong to a club down the road here, and I've met a bunch of people. So that's important. And I get to meet people in my community, and then also to help my value of my mental health, that hand-eye coordination, and so there's many. So when I was first taking tennis lessons, man, if I made it in the green, I was happy. But there was a lot of failed shots, a couple of balls that went over the fence, but I kept on practicing and practicing and practicing. And today I played in the middle range players, and I burned a couple pretty good today, and that felt good, and so values is always going to be, we're going to have some failures. We're going to have some setbacks. And when those setbacks happen, watch what happens. That kid's going to wake up, the kid number one, and that kid's going to feel that guilt and the shame. And how come we're not there yet? And all of that stuff versus, hey, I'm just going to keep on trying this. And that's okay, as long as I'm connecting with my values. But the beauty, though, values are always perfect. And that's what I kind of want to leave this lesson, this talk before I go into the assignment. Values is always perfect. That chosen direction you have made a decision to move towards in itself is beautiful, it's perfect, and it's God's will, right? And so if we're willing to value, we have immediately won. Once you clarify and set the course on the value, you've won. Since the joy is in the journey, not the outcome, your values are perfect and nothing is missing. It's just a matter of living moment by moment, day to day, staying true to your values as an act of self-fidelity. That's the key. And again, when I first got into recovery, and then when I learned about values, I did all these exercises, but I really, really never knew it until I took a dive into this view of recovery called acceptance and commitment therapy, and really dug into this work called values. So I want to share a little story. A recent newspaper story about a world-class athlete is very revealing in this regard. She was #1 in the world in her event, had won 2 consecutive world championships. Only a few handfuls of human beings on the planet ever reached that level of athletic achievement. Yet upon winning her 2nd championship, she said her primary emotion was neither elation nor satisfaction, but fear. The reason? She was afraid she wouldn't win next year. And there is where we get a glimpse of the way our minds work, right? Instead of really just appreciating that win in the moment, it's that fear of, oh my God, will I win it again? Right? And that's when we know we're in a goal-driven life versus a value-driven life. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email this to Reed. And this is a really cool exercising. So this is the homework if you decide to accept it, Mr. Phelps. And Reed will email this. Are the short exercises that will help stir something in you. Remember, doing this work is going to cause a stir in your heart. It's not meant for you to gain concrete crystallization. It's supposed to really kind of open you up going, what's really important to me? And how do I want to live? So there's going to be 10 domains that we're going to ask each person to take a look at. And there's marriage, couple, intimate relationships, there's parenting, there's family relationships, there's friendships, social relationships, career, employment, then there's education, training, personal growth, recreation, leisure, spirituality, citizenship, and health and physical well-being. So what's going to follow is a brief description of each one of these domains for you to describe what is important to you. And the exercise is going to kind of go like this. All right, so say if you chose marriage, couple, intimate relationships, the most people, intimate relationships are very important. This is the relationship you have with your significant other, your spouse, your lover, or your partner. If you're not in such a relationship right now, you could still answer these questions in terms of what you aspire to find in such a relationship. So what kind of person would you like to be in the context of an intimate relationship? It might help you to think about specific actions you would like to take and then use those to dig down to the underlying motives for the actions. What are the underlying motives? How do they reflect what you value in your relationship? Don't put down goals like, I'm going to get married. There'll be an opportunity for those later. All right. So that will be one exercise, and you'll see a little bit of work you can write down on each one of those values. So do them at your free time. But what I want to do, though, is I'm going to stop sharing, is have everybody do something really, you could do it effectively and immediately, and you could do it tomorrow. So I need a couple of volunteers from the audience. What's something you really value? Who and what's important to you? Give me an example of one value that if you could make a change in would be really important for you. That would really mean a lot for you. Okay, so I know you're a pavilion, but I wondered if you can tomorrow do something that is, and don't forget to think small, do something that would be career oriented. It might be maybe writing down some of your aspirations for your career or whatever it might be, all right? But, or are you allowed to get phone passes in Pavilion? Okay, or maybe even get a pass and make a phone call to somebody that you've either worked with or going to work with, and just to say hello. But more importantly, so this is what I call the flavor and savor exercise. So tomorrow, take an action and you're going to flavor that action with your value. All right. And then after you flavor that action with your value, sit back and savor. And notice how it feels moving in your value direction. So I know you've got limitations, but think of something you could do while you're in pavilion, and you don't have to answer and tell me what you're going to do. I just want you to think about it. For instance, this is a great example. I value being caring and intimate with my partner, my wife. And so yesterday I was thinking about this workshop I was going to do. And yesterday when I came home from doing some work outside in the community, I came home and I practiced being caring to my wife purposely, because that's the value direction I chose. And then she asked me how I was doing, because I asked her how she was doing to show care. And when she asked me how I was doing, instead of just saying, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay, I kind of let her know a few struggles I had during that morning when I was out. And I practiced being intimate. So after I flavored my interaction with my wife, I sat back and I savored that moment. And I noticed it was right here, right? Anybody ever like do a behavior, you know it's moving in your value direction and you feel it right here, you feel it in your gut and there's no denying it, right? So the more we purposely do that in our lives mindfully, the more reinforcement that behavior will get, and we're apt to do it over and over and over again. Does that make sense? Nice to meet you. Good luck in there, all right? You got some good counselors there. Anybody else? So selfish is the opposite of the value direction you want to move in. The value direction that you want to move in sounds like is relationships with friends and people. So now keeping that in the back of your mind, tomorrow when you wake up, when you see a situation present itself, go, hey, that guy Joe, that bald-headed guy that was on the Zoom meeting last night said, let me try flavoring this interaction with being selfless and to really work on establishing a relationship with this person, even if it's something small. Then after you flavor that situation, then savor it and see how it feels. All right? Does that make sense? Great. So we'll give those handouts out, but a simple thing we could do is everybody tonight kind of reflect on who and what's important to me. And then tomorrow when we wake up, when we see a situation we can flavor with our value, do so, and then savor the end result. So we got a couple of minutes left. Right, Reed?
That's right. We have a couple of minutes left. I'm just so impressed with how this group handled our Zoom bombers. I mean, we didn't lose any participation. Like we've got the one person who, Joe, you noticed had to step out, told me he was going to have to step out at the beginning of the meeting. So that had nothing to do. I'm just, wow, you know, how cool are our alumni? How cool, Joe, the example of just when that happened, I'm inspired, honestly. And I know like maybe not everyone made it back to the classroom, the main classroom at Pavilion. When that happened, you know, some people might have left and not came back. And I would have been one of those people, and Joe I wouldn't have been one of those people that came back when I was in treatment, but here I am, you know, going to celebrate 13 years of continuous sobriety and clean time on Wednesday, if I make it to Wednesday. And so if you're in the classroom right now, your actions are above and beyond what mine were when I was at Pavilion. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for that.
And Reed, if I may just jump in, what this shows is this: even with the adversity, right? If we're moving in our value direction, we're going to have setbacks. There's going to be some crooked roads and gravel and mountains to climb. But if we continue to move on our value direction, which everybody who came back, you know what that tells me is all of y'all value your recovery. That's why you came back. Right? So perfect example that sometimes we fail or adversity comes in and we continue to move in our value direction. So good going, everybody. You are welcome. That helps me continue moving in my value direction, hearing people that all we did was we laid some tools out in front of you. You decided to pick them up, and you gain knowledge of those tools, but more importantly, you understand those tools. And so thank you, David. God bless. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's going to motivate me to keep on doing what I'm doing.
Okay. Joe, if you would take us out with a prayer of your choice.
Let's stick with the old serenity prayer. And I'm going to add a little something to serenity prayer that a lot of people believe that this acceptance and commitment therapy was really built upon. And it'll go like this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And what I can't change is my addict brain. It's always going to be there. I could quiet it down, but I could never get rid of it. That's why I'm powerless over it. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. The courage to change the things I can. What can I change? My committed actions, my values, the way I move, and the wisdom to know that difference. Right?
Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Thanks, Joe, for presenting.
Yep.